With this short audio vignette, I want to take you on a journey. And with that journey, I want to ask an important question. A question that perhaps you can present to people you encounter who believe that the Christian Bible is literally perfect, literally good, and literally true. Beyond that, I hope it encourages you and inspires you, and serves as a reminder to all of us of just how far humanity has come and what we might one day achieve. Space Exploration Technologies Corporation, SpaceX, a private aerospace company based out of Hawthorne, California. It was founded 17 years ago by entrepreneur Elon Musk, with the goal of advancing space travel and transport for private and public use for both us and our governments and humanity as a whole, and with the on-the-horizon goal of one day establishing a colony of human beings living on Mars. April the 11th, 2019. It's the test launch of the SpaceX Falcon Heavy, a partially reusable vehicle with a combination of 27 engines driving a mega rocket. The Falcon Heavy has the highest payload capacity of any launch vehicle in operation today, its maiden launch taking place in February of last year. I'm sure you remember, the Falcon Heavy carried a Tesla Roadster as its test payload, and the car, the Roadster, and its mannequin astronaut driver, affectionately called Starman, with a number of video cameras attached to the vehicle so we could watch, began a heliocentric journey that crossed the orbit of Mars and left planet Earth literally in its rear view mirror. That little Tesla automobile hit a distance of 158 million miles from the Sun on November 19th of last year, and then began in its orbit back into the inner solar system. And this September, it will head back out and then return and back out and return for who knows how long. Starman's long drive began upon the thrust of the Falcon Heavy rocket. And on the 11th of April of this year, the Falcon's second journey began from that very site that long ago hosted the Apollo missions to the moon and the historic flights of the NASA space shuttles, Pad 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. 5 million pounds of thrust blasting fire and smoke as the Falcon Heavy rose up to pierce the sky. The payload this time was not a Tesla, but an advanced communication satellite. You know, for the years previous, space agencies had to retrieve booster rockets from the ocean. We've all seen the films of the rockets separating from the main spacecraft and then falling back in, a parachute landing into the seas. But not on this day. These booster rockets, each one costing as much as a 747, would fall to Earth guided on course via heat-resistant grid fins and cold gas thrusters, coming down vertically almost like a reverse launch, deploying their landing legs, firing the engines only seconds before impact with the Earth, producing massive sonic booms upon deceleration, and then achieving a precision vertical landing that leaves the entire booster rocket right there on the landing pad totally intact and ready for refit and reuse. To watch the video of this is just amazing. It's staggering. The two booster rockets coming down, the center core rocket as well, making a platform landing on the ocean, hearing the cheers of the SpaceX team as their collective efforts pay off. All of the innovation and problem solving and risk taking and calculation and vision, all of that pays off. Honestly, it's a bit like watching Neil Armstrong walking on the moon all over again. It's a moment. It's a very special moment in history. that'll open doors for human exploration not even imagined yet. You want to get goosebumps? Listen to this audio of the SpaceX team as they watch with anticipation and celebration as the first 2 booster rockets land successfully.
Coming up in about 5 seconds here, the side boosters landing burn will begin as well.
And yet, right now, in the 21st century, Bible-believing Christians still believe the popular story in Genesis chapter 11. I'll just read you the verses. I'll read you the story directly from the Bible. Genesis chapter 11, verse 1 begins by saying, "Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, 'Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly.' They used brick instead of stone, and tar for mortar. And then they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city, with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth.' But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. Now, it's unclear why a God who sees all from everywhere would have to come down to see something, but he did. Verse 6 continues, "The Lord said, 'If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other.' So the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth." This story from Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 through 9, is a story of human ambition. Ambition to build upward, to reach higher, to accomplish something as a unified group, and to bask in the glow of accomplishment. Yahweh saw this ambition, this arrogant climb upward toward the heavens, and he angrily splintered humanity into confusion and chaos. This story is supposedly the explanation for why our planet has so many different languages. It's interesting, the Native Americans of the Sonoran Desert, the Tohono O'odham people, have a similar story about their ancestors who became wicked, and they tried to build this huge house that reached up to heaven, but the Great Spirit was angered and destroyed that house with lightning from the sky. The Karen people of Myanmar also have their own story about their ancestors who lived 30 generations after the biblical Adam. They had built a huge pagoda in the land before the languages were confused and then the people split into differing tribes. In the famous Sumerian myth called Enmakar and the Lord of Aratta, that story actually reverses the narrative. King Enmakar was constructing a giant multi-story building called a ziggurat, and he needed precious materials for the build. And so he petitioned the god Enki to unify all the languages of humankind into one in the interest of cooperation so they could get the job done. Most often, though, these stories carry the common theme of human beings reaching upward in search of accomplishment, their ambition igniting the spark of God's anger, and their towering achievements abandoned or destroyed outright. So how high had these builders reached before God got angry and came down and scattered their efforts to the wind? How tall was the structure in progress that stoked the divine fires of consequence? How about 300 feet? The vertical equivalent of the length of a football field. Now, the book of Genesis presents and expects us to believe that a 100-meter structure represented the height of human arrogance. 300 feet was all it took to send God, if you will pardon the expression, into orbit. Did you know that right now, the Voyager 1 spacecraft that was launched back in September of 1977, over 41 years ago, right now, is 13.5 billion miles from Earth. It is the most distant human-made object from our planet by a long shot. It's flown by Jupiter and Saturn's largest moon, Titan. Even the relatively obsolete technology of 1977 was still light years ahead of the primitive builders and the limited resources and the bricks and the tar and the clumsy tools and technology of the Old Testament. I mean, can you imagine trying to explain to the builders of thousands of years ago how far we, as human beings, would one day reach? And how we would document our climb into the heavens with photographic imagery that gives us what they might consider a God's eye view. While they were describing their tiny world with quills and parchment, imagine if we could go back in time and show them that famous photograph taken by Voyager 1 on the 14th of February 1990, the famous photo of Earth cast against the vastness of our solar system, taken 3.7 billion miles from home, the photograph so affectionately referred to as the pale blue dot. Imagine trying to explain to the builders of Genesis things like Earth orbit satellites and lunar probes, manned and unmanned spacecraft, and the International Space Station, which right now is in a low Earth orbit above us, fashioned by human ingenuity and ambitiously developed for the advancement of our species, a research laboratory in space, a lab for the conducting of experiments in biology and physics and astronomy, meteorology, other fields. And talk about a unifying structure for humankind. The International Space Station has seen 236 occupants from 18 different countries: the U.S., Japan, Canada, France, Germany, Belgium, Denmark, Malaysia, and so many others. So does it make any sense, my friends, to accept the biblical story of Babel, where a stacking of bricks reaching about 300 feet into the sky brings punishment from on high, and yet that same God would remain silent and undetectable as we breach the solar system and stretch the hand of human discovery far out into the cosmos? Even right here on Earth, our modern buildings have shattered any notions of greatness our ancestors ever had. The Petronas Tower 2 in Kuala Lumpur reaches up 1,483 feet, 5 times the alleged height of the Tower of Babel before it was abandoned. The International Commerce Center in Hong Kong is almost 1,600 feet with 108 floors. One World Trade Center has 94 floors at 1,776 feet. Or how about the tallest building in the world in Dubai, the Burj Khalifa, 163 floors, 828 meters, 2,717 feet. That is more than half a mile high, and yet not a single sign of protest, not one word or gesture from an angry God. In fact, there is no sign, not one single sign of any God at all. As we reach ever further as a species, we have to challenge this claim by Christian literalists that the same God who punished us in Genesis chapter 11 for building a structure that was the height of the Statue of Liberty would say and do nothing in protest as we construct the tallest skyscrapers, as we summit Mount Everest and take videos and photos on our smartphones, The same phones that operate really as miniature translators these days, connecting us up to the second with people of other cultures and languages all around the world. We dive down in subsurface vessels more than 35,000 feet into the Mariana Trench to touch the ocean floor. We are planning colonies on other planets, and we're snapping photographs that are so far beyond what the naked eye could accomplish, far beyond the Earth-bound telescope, far into the reaches of the cosmos, and even into the origins of the universe itself. And philosophically, of course, it's correct to challenge this notion of any God that would give his created children a working brain and then punish us for ingenuity. It's right to challenge the notion of any God that would give us a window to the stars and then purposefully ground us so that we could not pass through it. And it is right to see as immoral any God that would punish his own children for the sin of imagining, dreaming, planning, designing, experimenting, building, and accomplishing things that were once considered impossible. I guess we could just shrug and accept the stories of old, stories about gods and anger and consequence, or we could evolve past those myths in an exercise that I think is one of both ambition and humility. We're proud of our accomplishments, we're working toward betterment, and with every new revelation, we also realize our humble place in the universe. And more every day, we understand the tremendous privilege of being alive at this moment to discover it. As I referenced the pale blue dot a few moments ago, allow me to conclude with the words of the late cosmologist, author, and dreamer Carl Sagan. He said, "Every aspect of nature reveals a deep mystery and touches our sense of wonder and awe. Those afraid of the universe as it really is, those who pretend to non-existent knowledge and envision a cosmos centered on human beings, will prefer the fleeting comforts of superstition. They avoid rather than confront the world. But those with the courage to explore the weave and structure of the cosmos, even where it differs profoundly from their wishes and prejudices, will penetrate its deepest mysteries."